What are the ingredients for a good story? Is it character? Is it plot? Is it narrative? Does there have to be action? Maybe a twist? Perhaps all of those make a good story. Jesus can tell a good story. In fact, I would describe him as a master storyteller. His stories have passed the test of time. We're still telling them now, 2,000 years later, and that's because he used ordinary, everyday life, people, and situations to tell us more about ourselves as human beings, but also to show us what God is like. One of Jesus's most well-known stories is the one that we've had today at morning prayer, the story of the lost or prodigal son. It's probably familiar to most of you listening today. In this story, the youngest child says to his father, "Look, I want my share of the inheritance now. I want your money, basically. I wish you were dead. I want it now." Perhaps we haven't said that to our parents, but maybe we have been impatient. What about the times we couldn't wait for something? We had to have it now, whatever the cost, where we had to take it out on credit rather than save up for it. This young man, the father gives him his share of his inheritance. The father doesn't tell him to get lost. Instead, he sets him free. The son decides to leave, and he spends his money on what the Bible calls wild living, debauchery. I always have in my mind an image of casinos in Las Vegas and drunken parties, whatever. But the guy, his money soon runs out. His luck is out. So what does he do? He has to go and work for an employer, a pig farmer. For a Jew, a pig is an unclean animal. So Jesus is showing us that this guy has fallen really, really far, as low as he can go. He's hungry. He even longs for the food the pigs are eating. And then we hear that he came to his senses. He suddenly thought, hang on, my father has many servants. They're living better lives than me. Maybe I can go back to him and ask to be one of his servants. At least then I'll get food in my belly. What prevented him from waiting so long? Probably pride. Many of us are the same. We don't like to admit when we've made a mistake. And this guy has made a mistake. He's left. He's gone to a far-off country, away from his family, away from his life. And yet he turns. And this is what God invites us all to do, to turn back to him. There's no mistake that we've made that cannot be rectified. The father in the story, he doesn't stop his son from going, and yet clearly he aches for him. He aches for his return. We hear that when he was far off, his father saw him in the distance. For me, that tells us that he was always on the lookout for him, always hoping that he would return. And this is what God is like. When we turn and go far from him, he's always on the lookout for us, always hoping we'll come back, but he never forces. When the father and the son are reunited, the son wishes to apologize, to accept that he will now be a servant, but the father is having none of it. Firstly, he runs towards him. Jewish men never ran. It was seen as undignified, yet this father runs. He's so joyous. He's overwhelmed that his child has returned. And he restores him to his rightful place, to sonship, not a slave. That's what God does with us. We're not servants, we're not strangers in his house. We are beloved children. Even when we mess up, we can always come back. if we are sorry, if we recognise that we need to turn our lives around. I know in my own life, I always have to do that. I'm always having to come back to God and say, I'm sorry, I've messed up. Please forgive me, give me another start. And this is what the Christian message is all about. None of us are ever written off. All of us can start again. Our Father is always waiting for our return. He's always waiting to put the ring on our fingers and new shoes on our feet, to put a robe on us because we are beloved to him. Equally, we look at the Father who lavished his forgiveness on his Son. Notice he didn't ask him too many questions. He just delighted in his return. But we too have got to extend that forgiveness. We've got to be the Father who forgives, the Father who looks out for those who have hurt us and wounded us, to long for their return, for reconciliation with them. So today, come back to God. Tell God how much you love him. Ask for his forgiveness. Delight in your son and daughtership. And today, extend forgiveness to someone whom you are not reconciled to. May God bless you all.